Hi, so just a disclaimer. This is one of those videos where I feel very strongly about the subject, so I'm going to try to not make it sound like a rant. Um, I came across a video on talk radio. I don't really listen to talk radio, but somehow they've come up with my recommended viewing on Facebook. Anyway, there was a caller who was claiming that he knew people in Ukraine. He wouldn't go into the specifics, but he claimed that he knew people in Ukraine and there's no war. It's all a special military operation. Now, this guy wasn't Russian. He wasn't calling from Moscow or St. Petersburg or Novgorod. He was British and he was parroting this line. The host, of course, remonstrated with that. Um, but what disturbed me was not so much the call, but the fact that in the comment section there were quite a few people lining up to defend this idiot and parrot the same line. Now, this gets into what I was talking about, that we respect the right for people to have opinions, but we don't have to respect opinions in themselves. This idea, respect all opinions, it's just totally nonsense. It's not human nature, and it isn't reality of how we approach ideology and how we see the world. You can't respect all opinions. Respecting all opinions would mean that you give the same um, sort of level of legitimacy to a view that is utterly baseless to one that has basis in fact. So that's just it's a silly proposition. No, I do not respect all opinions. I respect that in a free society people have the right to voice opinions. Um, I think that should be as wide as possible. Um, However, I do think that if they are in the capacity, so far I haven't seen this, but they seem to be just random people. But if they are in a capacity, for example, if they are in the armed forces or they're in any sort of political role or anything to do with national security, and they're voicing support for Russia, or more specifically Putin, I think they should be seen as traitors. I really, really do. And that is not a word I use lightly. Again, getting into words being used. I'm not someone to throw words around, or at least I try hard not to. But what else is treason if not supporting a foreign tyrant who is a threat? And anyone that doubts that, you just have to go back 4 years to Salisbury. That shows the power of the Russian state under Putin and its malevolent agenda. So they might think, oh, it's just Ukraine. What's it got to do with us? Europe is not a very big continent. You know, we only have a couple of time zones in this continent. Compare that to countries like Russia. Well, Russia indeed is a good example. Is it 9 time zones? My point is, Europe is, as continents go, not very big. So this is local in that sense. Look at a map of the world. Look at the UK, look at Ukraine in a world context. We're not that far apart. We're not next door to one another, but we're not that far apart. But anyway, honestly, I find it very hard to keep in the cool with such people because, ignorance can be forgiven if it's from a place of not having access to knowledge. If you grow up in a totalitarian state and you're fed only one narrative and that's all you listen to, then you're going to form certain opinions, but that is the environment that you're in. Many Russians are being deprived of information on Ukraine. Um, then there's people, so, if it was Russians, I would explain that by um, Putin's censorship machine, but also nationalism. Russia's a very patriotic country. That would make sense. It would still be, I wouldn't agree with it, but it would make sense at least. If they were coming from parts of the world that might have had some history with the West, or there is some particular sentiment that is anti-West, that again would make sense. What I find hard to stomach, though, is the fact that these people are often British, American, Canadian. And whilst most of them are obscure people on the internet, some of them are quite high profile. I mean, there's there's prominent Putin apologists in the West, from Oliver Stone to Peter Hitchens to others. And as far as I'm concerned, if you are blaming this entirely on NATO, that is enough to constitute being a Putin apologist, because by extension, you're mitigating any responsibility from Russia's president. Um, so yeah, I think that is it's apt to call them Putin stooges. Tulsi Gabbard is another example. Apparently, she's been regurgitating Kremlin narratives that there's chemical weapons in Ukraine to justify Putin's actions. Now, I think Tulsi Gabbard's quite clever. She's clever enough to not outright say, I support Putin. But this woman, she has quite a strong support base because, I mean, I don't think she's ever going to be in the White House, but she's the sort of politician who could be a kingmaker, or she could have some influence. Mitt Romney, the former Republican candidate, he has criticized her attitude. He's criticized Donald Trump. Now, on his page, it's bombarded with Trump cultists attacking him, uh, ironically, for not accepting democracy when they're the ones who don't accept democracy. And I don't want to get make this video into sort of just make it about internal American politics, but it is significant the number of people in the United States, and there's a lot of them here as well, who will actually argue with a straight face that there is no war in Ukraine, or if there is, that it's justified, that Russia's actions are justified, denazify Ukraine. Yesterday, a Holocaust survivor was killed in Russian shelling. Um, one of the main talking points is they don't believe anything coming from the mainstream media. Well, I am no cheerleader for the BBC and CNN, particularly those two networks. I think they have been guilty of bias. I think the coverage on certain issues, particularly race issues, is appalling. Um, so in no way am I sort of saying that those networks are absolutely a paradigm of integrity. I don't think they are. But even if you disregard mainstream media, because this is always your talking point, oh, I've never listened to the mainstream media. All right, so what are your sources? That's the obvious question. What are your sources? If the sources are RT, then as far as I'm concerned, that's a dead end because it's just a mouthpiece of the Kremlin. That's all it is. It's proven that time and time and time again. Um, Now, if they say, "Oh, I don't watch RT, but I listen to," well, I don't know. That is the question, isn't it? What is their source? Because they could disregard Western media. That's easy to say. It's a bit harder to disregard the testimony of Ukrainian refugees, people who have literally fled their homes. I mean, what the hell do they think all these people are fleeing from? Are they so mind-numbingly stupid that they genuinely think? I mean, I feel myself getting angry here. And I know most of my subscribers don't think this way, so excuse me for that. But do they really believe that these people are all crisis actors? I mean, it's bad enough that they smear survivors of mass shootings as crisis actors, which is, we're talking a few dozen people. But here we're talking literally about millions of people. So are they going to say with a straight face the millions of Ukrainians that have gone into Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic are just acting to make Russia look bad? I mean, it's a level of disconnection from reality such that they genuinely believe that. I mean, that's kind of worrying. I'm not interested in getting them to see reason. I think that's very, very difficult with that sort of conspiracy nut. I really do. I think that they will believe what they want to believe, and no amount of presenting them with facts or information or any of that is going to change because you could introduce a Ukrainian refugee to them And they would say, no, this person's a crisis actor. So when they have this block on reality, you can't get through to them. I wouldn't support censoring them because that will only galvanize their stupidity. It would only galvanize their sense of victimhood. So I don't support that. Um, if anything, it's interesting, to let them have the view to see just how big the problem is. Um, but I have no respect for them. I give them no respect. I try not to engage with them because it's just tiring. Um, this isn't like, well, we'll agree to disagree, or we have a different point of view. Let's rationally argue it out. I really don't believe that you can debate with someone with that sort of mindset. So this video isn't about getting them to see the light. It's more just discussing how deep is this problem? How many people think like this? Looking at the talk radio comments, it's not just a couple of people. Now, is the disillusion with Western media outlets such that they're prepared to believe lies and falsehoods? In which case, Western media outlets need to look at themselves and think, where have we gone wrong? How have we motivated this level of cynicism that people are prepared to believe that reality isn't reality? It's just so I guess in that sense they're partly to blame because of their bias in Western politics. Um, but honestly, I find it hard to keep my cool with this mentality. Why? Not just because they're wrong. I think it is callous. I think it is a callous insult to Ukrainians whose country is being brutalized. Russian forces are killing indiscriminately. Given that the Kremlin has said Ukraine isn't a country, I think this would have some of the legal definitions of genocide. If some of the reports now are suggesting that people are being forced out of Mariupol into Russian cities, forced displacement. Things like that, would need certainly more than one source. And, I don't say everything coming from Ukrainian sources is 100% true. For example, we need to be a little bit cautious about Ukrainian figures on Russian casualties, for example. Naturally, in a war, one side will want to look like it's prevailing. So I don't say absolutely everything coming from Kiev should be taken as gospel. But morally, I certainly know which side I'm on. Um, but that's it, really. Some random person behind the internet who is heavily influenced by this stuff is bad enough, but when you have someone like Tulsi Gabbard, I remember when I made a video about her stance on Assad, I was fiercely attacked by her supporters. But she's doing it again. This woman, she's definitely been pandering to the Republican Party. Maybe she sees herself as eyeing up a GOP presidential slot or maybe a vice presidential slot. I wouldn't put it past Donald Trump to put her on the VP ticket. It would be clever in terms of pandering to his base. Um, because the thing is, she's a smart woman. I think some of her positions are reprehensible. I think the fact that she visited Bashar Assad, she claims it was for diplomatic reasons. She had no authority to do so, and she didn't meet his opposition. Only belatedly did she condemn his atrocities. Now she's churning out the Kremlin narrative. And then she and her supporters complain when she's labelled a Russian stooge. Well, what else is she? If she's going to spin out Kremlin propaganda, I think she's someone to watch. I've no respect for her. Another problem I have with Tulsi Gabbard, and this is another tactic that conspiracy people often use, or Russia apologists often use, particularly if they come from the sort of background that she does, which is she's a former soldier. So it's very easy for her to play the patriotism card because she did serve her country. But that doesn't mean that she can't be wrong. Oliver Stone served in Vietnam. Just because someone has served in their armed forces doesn't mean that they have a monopoly on truth or patriotism. Particularly, I'm looking at Tulsi Gabbard as the politician, not the soldier. She might have served her country, but the fact of the matter is, as a politician, time after time after time, she has went out of her way to condemn the West and to spin out the narrative of foreign regimes. I think the Republican Party is a swamp right now. Why? Because the moderates, people like Mitt Romney and there's a few others, are being sidelined. They're being attacked verbally. They're being, unfortunately, they don't have much influence now. Trump has totally toxified it. And I just find it ironic that they talk about Biden being weak and, oh, this would never have happened if Trump was in power. Just look at the attitude of Trump supporters, the pro Russian attitudes of Trump supporters. And that might not be all of them. There might be some Trump supporters who have no time for Russia. But the sheer level of it's just troubling. The British equivalent is probably a contingent of people who also are very anti-vaccine, and I'm not going to crudely put everyone in one basket, but I think there's a lot of overlap. I do think there's a lot of overlap. I mean, the thing is, they are still a minority, so it's also important to not give them more credence than they deserve. But I don't think they deserve any respect. I think they should be forcefully, well, I was going to say I think they should be forcefully challenged, but it's a waste of time because they're not going to listen. They would say I'm just mainstream media shill, even though I've said I don't agree with everything the BBC and CNN comes out with. Um, but my point to them would be, even if you don't want to listen to mainstream media, whatever that is, I mean that's another term that's thrown around. Fox News is if mainstream means mass audience, Fox News is mainstream. RT was mainstream. And just a quick word on RT losing its license. Ofcom's finally acted on that, although it's a little bit pointless now because it was gone from our screens anyway because its licensing in the EU was cancelled. Um, a Canadian contact of mine, I respect the guy. He's no Putin stooge. He was saying it was a mistake because it means that Moscow can accuse us of hypocrisy. Well, that is a risk. And it is an obvious ammo for them. Oh, the West talks about free speech, but they've censored Russian state media. The fact is, for years, RT has had a chance. For years, RT has had a voice. And RT can still broadcast in Russia and across much of the world. Um, but the thing about freedom of speech, and I've always made this point, I have never, ever been a free speech absolutist. If you're using a powerful platform to spread lies, to prop up a tyranny, then I really don't think you have any moral high ground to talk. I mean, to use another example, CGTN, the Chinese state mouthpiece, they had aired forced confessions and kangaroo trials, including of a British citizen. Now, this notion that they're deprived of their free speech, I argue they've abused the power that they had um, by doing that. I don't think the free speech should mean that you can tell lies. I don't think the free speech should mean that you can make threats. RT and CGTN have just told barefaced lies. Frankly, I think it's long overdue. Um, in their official explanation, Ofcom said that free speech is something that they take very seriously. They explain the reasoning. My criticism is that they were too slow to act. To be fair to them, they knew that they would get a lot of heat from people who say they were censoring. But the big issue here is false equivalency. British journalists are not murdered for questioning Boris Johnson. You just have to look at the situation in Russia to see why this idea that RT is a victim is almost laughable. RT is an organ of the Russian state. It's not just the Russian perspective, it is an organ of the Russian state. So, I mean, put it this way, if you think that it's censoring the Russian opinion, what about Russian dissidents? What about Alexei Navalny, an incredibly brave man who today was sentenced to 9 more years in prison? Um, RT never airs their point of view. RT has no right to talk about freedom of speech when they don't allow differing points of view. They just have no moral high ground. So I think it's a phony argument, really. Um, I mean, it's like saying, well, allow the. I don't know which analogy to use because I think it's preposterous. I just don't think it's the right analogy at all to say, well, to use a sort of equivalency. I've no time for it. I mean, I have to say, when RT started off, I was intrigued by it. I watched it for a few years. I never fully believed it, but it was interesting. It was a new channel. It was intriguing. Um, but it's very, very obvious they have become nothing but a mouthpiece of the Putin regime. I mean, they've had anchors resign over the years because of this. On air. Some of the British correspondents finally found their conscience. I don't give them much credit, because only with the invasion of Ukraine did they finally do the right thing and resign. But for years they were lackeys for the Kremlin, so I don't give them too much credit. Right, I'm going to round this up. I know that these people are a minority. The problem is they're a vocal minority. I mean, I don't think they've any real influence in terms of a political level, particularly. But so I don't support censoring them. And I think actually, if they were censored, it would just give them a sense of victimhood and oppression. But I think they deserve no respect, and I don't think they deserve civility when they're going to parrot the lies of a dictatorship. They don't deserve any respect. If that makes them uncomfortable, then maybe they need to have a good, long, hard look in the mirror. Anyway, I hope that wasn't a rant. I hope that was just me laying out why I feel so strongly about this, um, in a clear way. Okay, thanks for watching.